There's something about the word return that echoes deeply in our soul, as if each letter carried the weight of a universal secret that we all somehow know, but have forgotten. Maybe that's why so many people, when recounting near-death experiences, don't describe it as moving into the unknown, but as returning to something deeply familiar. It felt like going home, they say, eyes glistening, voices trembling with the emotion of finally finding something they'd long been searching for, without even knowing what it was. This feeling of returning, of reuniting with a forgotten part of ourselves, is one of the most moving and universal features found across decades of studies on the threshold between life and death. Seen through this lens, death stops being a terrifying end and transforms into a doorway, a way back to a place our soul instantly recognizes as its true home, even if our minds have no conscious memory of it. Nature teaches us again and again about cycles and returns. The seasons spin in their eternal dance. Water rises into the sky only to return as rain. Stars are born, die, and their elements return to the cosmos to birth new stars. Nothing in nature simply ends. Everything transforms and returns. Why would it be different with human consciousness, that intangible force living within our bodies? Maybe our fear of death comes from spiritual amnesia, this temporary forgetting that we are cyclical beings, perpetual travelers on a much longer and more complex journey than one earthly life can explain. Our attachment to this life, this body, this particular identity, makes us see death as an absolute end, when it might only be a bend in the road, a return to a different stage of existence. It was by observing these remarkable patterns in the testimonies of people who had been clinically dead that Raymond Moody began to see a larger picture. Initially, as a skeptical physician and philosopher, he expected scattered stories, desperate minds grasping for comfort in the face of the unimaginable. But what he found was something else, a surprising convergence of experiences that transcended cultural, religious, and social boundaries. A kind of universal grammar of death began to emerge. And within that grammar, the idea of return took center stage. I was going home. It was like I had always belonged there. I recognized it immediately, though I'd never been there before. Phrases like these appear with unsettling frequency, not only in Moody's research, but in testimonies gathered by researchers all over the world. This vision of returning invites us to fundamentally rethink our understanding of death. It's not the end of a journey, it's the completion of a cycle. It's not about ending, it's about transitioning. Not a fall into the abyss of non-being, but a return to the home of primordial consciousness. It's as if we're playing a cosmic game of hide-and-seek, where our true nature hides momentarily in the material world, only to be rediscovered at the moment we call death. There's something deeply comforting in this perspective, something that resonates with that part of us that has always known we belong to something greater, vaster, and more eternal than our individual existence. What if we saw life not as a straight path, with a sudden beginning at birth and a final stop at death, but as a continuous spiral of experiences, where each life is just one segment in a much grander journey? What if our arrival here, on this planet, in this body, was already a kind of return? Maybe that's why some landscapes stir our emotions for no apparent reason, why we meet people who feel inexplicably familiar. Maybe that's why we sometimes feel an unexplainable nostalgia for places we've never been, or times we never lived in. The soul holds its own memories, whispered in dreams and intuition, constantly reminding us that we've been here before, and that one day we will return. When someone recounts a near-death experience, there's one particularly fascinating element, the way they describe that moment of recognition. It was like I always knew where I was going, they say, with the calm certainty of someone who has finally solved a riddle that had lingered their entire life. It's as if the soul speaks its own language, an ancient dialect that goes beyond words and logic, communicating through instant recognition, through absolute familiarity. This silent language emerges in moments when we are most vulnerable, when all layers of identity fall away, leaving only the purest essence of consciousness. It is in that total transparency that the soul finally reads the invisible inscriptions that were always there, like a coded map etched in our very being, revealing the way home. And yet, there's a paradox here. How can someone recognize a place they've never been to, at least not in this lifetime? Skeptics might argue it's nothing more than the subconscious, constructing illusions to soothe the fear of death. But such an explanation falls flat in the face of the overwhelming consistency of these stories, the profound conviction with which they're told, and above all, the transformative impact they have on the lives of those who experience them. Even Raymond Moody noted how this transcendent sense of familiarity was unlike déjà vu or fantasy. It had a reality to it that surpassed everyday life, a clarity, a certainty, often described as more real than real. This memory of the soul, this ability to recognize what lies beyond individual experience, suggests that consciousness may extend far beyond the limits of our current identity. It's as if each of us carries not only the memories of this life, but distant echoes of everything our consciousness has ever witnessed. A kind of spiritual DNA holding the complete record of our many journeys. Most of the time, we remain unaware of this ancestral memory, too caught up in survival, routine, and self-construction. But in rare, intimate moments, when the veil between worlds thins, we catch glimpses of that cosmic continuity, a memory not only of our biological ancestors, but of the consciousness that has flowed through time itself. This feeling of absolute belonging that surfaces in these moments may be the most touching element of near-death experiences. People describe an overwhelming sense of finally being where I was always meant to be, as if all their lives, in some deep part of themselves, they had been foreigners in a strange land and had now returned to their true homeland. That feeling is so powerful, so undeniable, that many people express reluctance to come back, even those with deeply cherished lives, families they adore, and causes they fight for, struggle with the idea of leaving that place. It was like coming back from exile, said one woman, as if my entire life on earth, despite all its joys and accomplishments, had been a temporary departure from the place where I truly belonged. It's remarkable how this sense of return dissolves the fear of death. People who've been through near-death experiences often describe a profound shift in how they relate to mortality. The existential terror that shadows so many lives, the primal fear of total annihilation, of complete cessation, simply vanishes after glimpsing. The way back, it's as if they were handed a map home. A guarantee that no matter how far we wander, there is always a path leading back to the soul's essential dwelling. This knowledge brings peace, not the peace that comes from belief or hope, but from direct experience, a serenity that transcends intellectual understanding. Recognizing this path back isn't just a comfort when death approaches, it changes the way we live. When we see death not as an ending, but as a return, all of life gains new perspective. Struggles, pain, and adversity don't disappear, but they become meaningful, not punishments or accidents, but essential passages, lessons woven into the curriculum of the soul. This understanding doesn't eliminate suffering, but it gives it a broader context, a purpose, a significance that stretches beyond the limits of our immediate reality. As we dive deeper into the study of near-death experiences, a consistent pattern emerges. Our consciousness seems to instinctively know the way back to its source. Like a salmon that never needed to be taught how to swim upstream to its birthplace, the soul appears to hold an innate map, guiding it home. This internal compass, this soul GPS, lies dormant for most of our lives, hidden by the noise and chaos of daily existence. But when we draw close to that threshold between worlds, when the outer layers of identity dissolve, this ancient knowing awakens, and it guides us with stunning precision back to where we came from. The idea of consciousness as a form of energy moving through eternal cycles is central to Raymond Moody's thinking, and aligns closely with what many near-death experiences describe. If we look closely, the entire universe seems to operate through endless cycles of transformation. Seasons shift in a never-ending dance. Tides rise and fall with the pull of the moon. Stars are born from cosmic dust, shine for billions of years, and eventually return their elements to the universe to create new stars. This perception of cyclical motion isn't just poetic, it's deeply scientific. The first law of thermodynamics teaches us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. If consciousness, as some modern philosophers and scientists suggest, is a fundamental form of energy, then it too must obey this universal law of conservation. What's fascinating is that this understanding is not exclusive to our time or to modern science. Ancient cultures around the globe, separated by oceans and centuries, came to remarkably similar conclusions about the cyclical nature of existence. The ancient Egyptians envisioned the afterlife as a circular journey through the underworld, ending in a glorious rebirth. Hindu tradition speaks of samsara, the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, only broken by complete enlightenment. Many indigenous peoples of the Americas describe life as a great wheel, where the end of one cycle inevitably marks the beginning of another. Through deep observation of nature and their intimate connection to the rhythms of the universe, these cultures seem to have intuited a truth that science is only now beginning to rediscover. Quantum physics, with its mind-bending revelations about the nature of reality, offers even more intriguing perspectives on the continuity of consciousness. When scientists like Max Planck, one of the fathers of quantum theory, assert that they see consciousness as fundamental and matter as derivative, it marks a revolutionary shift in scientific thought. A shift that aligns surprisingly well with the spiritual intuitions of ancient civilizations. Experiments in quantum entanglement, where particles separated by vast distances remain mysteriously connected, suggest a level of reality where time and space lose their absolute meaning. If particles can maintain such a connection, what's to say our much more complex and integrated consciousness couldn't also transcend the limits of time and space, especially in the moment of death? Birth and death, viewed from this perspective, are not isolated events or endpoints, but transitions in an infinite continuum of conscious experience. They are like revolving doors through which the energy of consciousness flows in its endless dance of expression and return. Birth is not a beginning. Death is not an end. They are transformations, passages, moments of metamorphosis in a journey that stretches far beyond the bounds of a single lifetime. This understanding doesn't make life less sacred. It makes it even more so, because when we realize that every life is a unique and unrepeatable expression of this eternal current of consciousness, every experience, every connection, every moment gains deeper meaning and calls for more reverence. Perhaps we can better grasp this cycle of consciousness by looking at the metamorphosis of a butterfly. A caterpillar enters the cocoon and, to all appearances, dies. Its body literally dissolves, becoming a formless paste before reorganizing into the shape of a butterfly. If the caterpillar had self-awareness, it would likely experience this process as a total death, an end of everything it knew itself to be. But from our broader perspective, we know it's not an end. It's a transformation. The essence of the being, the DNA, the biological continuity, remains intact through this apparent dissolution. In the same way, what we experience as death may simply be our inability to perceive the continuity of consciousness through its most radical transformation. It's striking how many people who've had near-death experiences describe a sensation of infinite expansion of consciousness, as if the boundaries of the individual self are temporarily lifted, allowing a much broader, integrated perception of reality. This expansion is often described as a return to a more fundamental, all-encompassing state of being, as if the individualized consciousness is reuniting with a larger awareness from which it had only temporarily separated. It was like a drop of water returning to the ocean, one man once said, but somehow still remembering it had been a drop. This metaphor of the drop and the ocean gives us a powerful way to understand the cycle of consciousness. Each of us is like a temporary wave rising from the infinite ocean of universal awareness, taking shape and identity for a brief moment, dancing our unique dance across the surface of existence, and then returning to the ocean we never truly left. From this perspective, death is not annihilation, it's reintegration. A return to the boundless source of all awareness. And just as the ocean loses nothing when a wave returns to it, the universal consciousness loses nothing when an individual consciousness completes its cycle. Everything is preserved. Everything continues, just in a different form, broader, deeper, more whole. There's a curious detail many researchers of near-death experiences, including Raymond Moody, have observed. The apparent veil of forgetting that seems to descend at the moment of birth. If we truly come from an expanded state of consciousness, a spiritual home we will eventually return to, why don't we remember it clearly? Why do we live our lives without conscious memory of our origin or our ultimate destination? This existential amnesia is one of the greatest mysteries of the human condition, and perhaps one of the keys to understanding the deeper purpose of our journey through physical life. Different spiritual traditions offer interpretations of this veil of forgetting. Some say the forgetting is intentional, a necessary part of the divine plan, allowing us to fully experience human life without the constant distraction of remembering other dimensions. Others propose that the density of material existence, the limitations of our senses and our brain, simply cannot contain the vastness of the expanded consciousness we experience beyond the body. It would be like trying to hold the ocean in a teacup. Something is inevitably lost in translation, and yet even with this seemingly impenetrable veil, there are moments in life when small cracks seem to appear, fleeting glimpses of what lies beyond. Déjà vu, that sudden, inexplicable feeling that we've lived a moment before, may be one of these cracks. That strange familiarity with places we've never been, the instant recognition of people we've just met, those vivid dreams that feel more like memories than fantasy, all may be tiny tears in the veil that separates our ordinary consciousness from its deeper origins. As we approach death, according to many near-death accounts, this veil begins to lift. It's as if the membrane between worlds becomes thinner and thinner, allowing the light of expanded consciousness to seep into our perception. Maybe that's why so many people in the final moments of life report visions of departed loved ones, luminous landscapes, or a growing sense of peace that defies explanation. The veil is lifting, memory is returning, and the soul begins to trace its way back home. This awakening seems to unfold in stages. First comes recognition, that sudden, overwhelming "ah, yes" that so many experiences describe. It's as if the soul suddenly remembers something deeply familiar that had been forgotten. Then comes reorientation, the understanding of where one is within the vastness of existence, the recovery of the wider context of the spiritual journey. Finally, there is reintegration, the process of reconciling with the totality of who we truly are, beyond the limited identity we built. In this particular life, it's fascinating how certain life experiences can temporarily lift this veil, offering us glimpses of what lies beyond. Deep meditative states, spontaneous mystical moments, intense artistic or creative ecstasy, deep interpersonal connection. These can all act as temporary windows into a broader reality. Some people describe moments of such extreme beauty or transcendence that they feel they are remembering something essential, something they've always known but had forgotten. It felt like remembering the future, one man said, trying to describe the strange sensation of recalling something he had never consciously experienced in this lifetime. But what is the purpose of this veil of forgetting? If consciousness is continuous and we are merely temporarily embodied in physical form, why not retain a clear memory of our broader nature? This question brings us to a deeper reflection on the true purpose of human experience. Maybe, as many spiritual traditions suggest, we are here precisely to experience separation, limitation, and the specificity of this particular incarnation. Maybe forgetting isn't a flaw in the system, but a feature, a necessary condition for fully diving into the joys and sorrows, triumphs and failures, connections and losses that define human life. In a way, forgetting can be seen as an act of cosmic love, a gift that allows us to live each life as a unique adventure, full of discovery and wonder. If we remembered everything, every past life, every realm, every truth, perhaps we'd lose our capacity to be surprised, to grow, to truly marvel at the beauty of each moment. The veil of forgetting allows us to see the world with fresh eyes, with the curiosity and awe of a child, discovering the magic of existence for the very first time. And perhaps there is a deeper wisdom in this rhythm of forgetting and remembering that defines our spiritual journey. Forgetting allows immersion in the experience. Remembering allows integration. It is a cycle of inhaling and exhaling, of diving in and rising up, of separation and reunion. As the veil begins to lift in that final transition we call death, many report a powerful realization. Of course, how could I have forgotten? It's as if life itself had been a deep dream, and in waking from it, we finally remember who we are and where we came from. In that moment of transcendent clarity, the purpose of forgetting and the beauty of remembering becomes radiant. The cycle is complete, the lesson is learned, and the soul returns, enriched by the journey to the home it never truly left. Among the countless near-death experiences collected over decades, one of the most powerful and recurring themes is the feeling of arriving at a spiritual home. This home is not described as a physical place in the traditional sense, but as a state of being, a dimension of existence where the soul finally feels whole. People often struggle to find adequate words to describe this experience, turning to metaphors that, though incomplete, attempt to capture the essence of something transcendental. It felt like being wrapped in an embrace of absolute love. Some say, like diving into an ocean of total understanding, say others, as if every atom of my being had finally found its perfect place in the cosmos, another person once described, grasping for language to convey an experience that transcends human vocabulary. What makes these accounts especially remarkable is the sense of absolute belonging that permeates them. It's not just about arriving somewhere beautiful or peaceful, it's about being exactly where one has always meant to be. This feeling is so deep and convincing that many people, upon returning to physical life, report a strange sense of displacement, as if they've become strangers in their own earthly existence. After experiencing that feeling of truly being home, one woman confessed after a near-death experience caused by a car crash. Life here sometimes feels like a temporary exile. It's not that I don't love my life or my family. I love them deeply. But now I know there's a place where I belong even more completely. And one day, I'll return. What's especially fascinating is how this spiritual home seems to completely transcend our normal notions of time and space. It's not a place one travels to in the traditional sense, but a state one remembers. It feels as though it exists everywhere and nowhere all at once. Experiencers often report an overwhelming sensation of infinite expansion, where the limits of physical perception and individuality dissolve, giving way to a broader, more encompassing awareness. It was like I could perceive everything at once, a man once shared, without the constraints of a single point of view. This transcendence of time and space in the spiritual home is curiously aligned with what modern physics suggests about the nature of ultimate reality. Einstein showed us that time and space are not fixed, but relative, deeply intertwined. Quantum physics goes even further, revealing that at the most fundamental level, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously and maintain instant connections across vast distances. If our physical reality already defies our everyday understanding of space and time, it's not hard to imagine that consciousness, freed from the limits of the body, could experience an even more fluid and expansive realm, where words like here and now lose their fixed meaning. Interestingly, the appearance or manifestation of this spiritual home varies significantly between experiences, seemingly shaped by their cultural, religious, and personal backgrounds. People from Christian traditions often describe scenes evoking paradise, gardens, of otherworldly beauty, celestial music, and beings of light identified as angels or holy figures. Hindu experiences may see deities or states reminiscent of samadhi or moksha. Those without religious affiliation may describe indescribably beautiful landscapes or simply a state of boundless awareness without any specific imagery. It's as though the core experience of returning home is translated through each individual soul's filter, taking on forms that are meaningful and recognizable to them. But despite these visual and symbolic differences, there remains a striking universality in the recognition, no matter how the spiritual home appears to each person, the sensation of familiarity, of belonging, of being home transcends all cultural and religious boundaries. This suggests that beneath the individualized manifestations shaped by personal experience, there exists a common underlying experience, perhaps a recognition of our truest nature beyond the temporary roles we play in this lifetime. Raymond Moody often commented on this fascinating paradox in his research. On one hand, the experience of the spiritual home feels deeply personal, tailored to each individual's understanding and expectations. On the other hand, there is a universal structure to the experience, a kind of shared grammar of the soul that transcends individual differences. It's as if every soul speaks its own dialect, but all those dialects stem from the same original language, the language of consciousness in its purest form. This paradox reminds us that reality can be both one and many, universal and individual. Just as white light refracts into countless colors through a prism, the primordial experience of returning to the spiritual home may manifest in infinite variations, each one perfectly tailored to the soul experiencing it. And just as every color of the rainbow is part of the same white light, all these expressions of the spiritual home may be reflections of the same fundamental reality, seen through the unique prism of each soul's consciousness. This understanding invites us to embrace a more inclusive and integrated view of human spirituality. Rather than clinging to literal interpretations or exclusive doctrines, we can begin to see that different spiritual traditions, with their varied maps of reality and diverse visions of the soul's final destination, might all be valid, though incomplete representations of the same transcendent territory. Each tradition, with its unique symbolic language, may be pointing to the same fundamental truth. That place beyond all places, that moment beyond all moments, where consciousness finally recognizes its true nature and its essential belonging to the infinite fabric of existence. This is not a call to discard belief systems, but rather to deepen them, to recognize that the essence of spirituality may lie not in rigid definitions, but in direct experience. And these experiences, whether glimpsed in a near-death moment, a dream, a deep meditation, or a flash of intuition, remind us of something we've always known, something we've never truly lost. As we listen to these stories, told by ordinary people who returned from the edge of life with extraordinary clarity, we begin to glimpse the edges of a deeper reality, a reality in which life and death are not opposites but partners, in which the soul is not born from the body but merely passes through it, in which every loss is a return, and every ending a transformation. This does not make our earthly life less meaningful. On the contrary, it makes it sacred, because within this brief passage we call life, the soul is learning, expanding, deepening. It's gathering what can only be gathered here, in the limitation, in the struggle, in the love, and in the beauty of impermanence. It's not about escaping the human experience, but about fully inhabiting it, knowing that even our most painful chapters are part of a far greater narrative, one in which the soul is never truly lost, never truly alone, and never without a way home. In this broader vision, death becomes less of a full stop and more of an ellipsis, less a falling away and more a lifting of the veil, less a departure and more a long-awaited return. A return not just to a place, but to a truth. A return not just to a memory, but to our original self. Return not to an ending, but to the continuity that has always been beneath it all. Perhaps that's the most beautiful realization of all, that we are not separate waves, crashing and vanishing, but the ocean itself, remembering its own depth, and that in the end we do not disappear. We come home.